So I'm very pleased to welcome Alan Davenport as our presenter today. Alan Davenport is the ELT consultant for the Asian region at Cambridge University Press. He's been actively involved in education for more than 15 years as a teacher, teacher trainer, administrator and examiner. Alan holds a bachelor's degree in linguistics and a master's of education with a focus on student development. This is the fourth and final webinar in his series of sessions on using authentic practice tests in the IELTS classroom. So, Alan, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. And I just have to say, before we begin, thanks to all three of you, Nikki and Jessica and Jenny, for all the support and everything you've done for making this series of webinars happen. It's been wonderful to put together. But without any further ado, we have a lot to talk about today. So I think we should just jump right in. As was mentioned, this is part 4, and parts 1, 2, and 3 deal with using authentic practice tests, listening, reading, and writing in classrooms as well. And those are up on the blog and on YouTube. So if this is your first time joining and you're worried about this being part 4, don't worry. It's not a requirement that you've seen the other parts before, but if you would go back and like to have a look, I'd just love to have you see it. I think that there's a lot of good stuff there. One of the things that I try to bring out in this series of webinars is kind of my formula for success that I've had with IELTS students. And I think that my formula can be summed up with this kind of equation here. Now, don't worry, it's not too much math, but I have CB plus APTP plus APTT equals S, and each one of those, of course, stands for something different. The CB being a course book, because I do think that when we are using materials in classrooms and teaching students, especially when we're on more than just a one-to-one situation, when we have a classroom of students with the IELTS, we do need a course book. Course books provide so much for us. And APTT on the other end, the authentic practice testing, we need to bring that in as well. We definitely need to make sure that students in any exam preparation classes are getting good and valid test practice so that they know what to expect in the exam. But for me, a lot of success involves including what's in between those two plus signs, really the APTP, which I consider authentic practice test in a practice mode. And this is where we use some parts of authentic practice tests that we can get, but maybe use them in a way besides just merely testing. So the webinars previously have kind of dealt with this idea, and today we're going to try to look to see how it applies to speaking. Now, before I get in specifically to speaking, I've received several emails from people, which I appreciate. Thank you for being in contact with me. And a question that I've been asked quite a bit is, what is the ratio in that to make the success happen? In other words, what is the right balance? Should it be 50% course book and 25% and 25%, or is it something else? And I don't have a solid answer for that other than to say it depends on your student. For example, if you have students who are requiring an IELTS 6.5 for their definition of success, but they're currently at a level around 4.5 and they have a year to study, that's going to tell me to use the course book and try to develop their English a lot more. If I have a student that needs a 6.5 and they're close to being at the 6.5, I might increase the amount of authentic practice testing. But either way, with that balance, what I think needs to be remembered is that authentic practice testing can be used as more than just, more than just giving a test in class and timing it and checking answers. It can be used as an impactful way to help our students get the score that they want or need, especially on the IELTS. Now, when we look directly at speaking, we need to remember that IELTS classes are still classes. They're still English classes, and they're plagued by the same issues that we find in any English class. Inhibition. And I say inhibition because I like that word better than shyness. I think a lot of times that we say students are shy to speak English, or they're just shy in general. But I look at them on the break with their friends, or I look at how they're interacting, and they're not shy personality-wise. There's some inhibition that comes in a speaking situation in a language class. And it makes natural sense. Speaking is a human being. Anytime that we speak, we draw attention to ourselves. Anytime we speak, the focus is on us, and it can be kind of daunting as a task to be in there. So inhibition really is something that we face in these classes. Classroom management issues as well. And I don't mean issues of discipline. I mean issues of how the room can be set up, about putting in groups and pairs, about how we can monitor, how we can just get the most out of our speaking activities. And also, I find specifically with IELTS students, that are taking the academic module, that they have a willingness sometimes to contribute, but they don't really know exactly what to say, or they haven't, been versed in critical thinking enough, or exposed to enough schema to have activated something inside of them on some of the topics. So we're asking them to talk about architecture or design or something that they're trying to do. And I'm seeing, by the way, that the microphone is a little bit of an issue. If it gets a little bit better, please let me know. I'm going to switch something right now. And let's try that. Let's see if that's a little bit better. If you could let me know in the chat box. Anyway, as I was saying, students have very little to contribute sometimes. And what we can find in that is that a good course book does so much more than just teach us about the issues of taking the test. A good course book finds context. It does give us more than just activities to develop speaking skill for the test. It does do that contextualization that is needed. And so when we talk about why a course book is important and why we can't just do practice testing again and again, I think it's because we do need those contexts so that our students can learn, and that helps us accomplish some of those issues, or get over some of those issues that we find in speaking classes, regardless of whether students are studying for the IELTS or not. Now, I think especially bringing in authentic practice tests, now we have our own set of issues as well, especially in the context of the IELTS. The IELTS test takes time. I mean, if we're going to give a true practice test, it's one-on-one, it's 11 to 14 minutes, there are 3 parts, and there's issues with the task itself. The tasks themselves are interview-style format. They're not exactly lending themselves to communicative type problems. They're very much responsive sort of tasks. And if we have classes that involve, a larger amount of people, the idea of feedback is something that we need to make sure we're addressing. How can we give feedback to our students to make sure that when we've practiced the test that we've done something meaningful in the class? And also this idea of target language acquisition versus memorization. And by this I mean, students they seem to want to do well on the IELTS, and they think that that means, teacher, tell me what I'm supposed to say, tell me what I'm supposed to say. I want to memorize the script. Where we know that memorization on the IELTS is going to actually cause problems. It's going to make it sound rehearsed. It's going to make it sound non-fluent. It's going to cause more problems than it is. But still, we want to give a lot of opportunities to speak, but we don't want students to just feel that we're doing it to make them memorize answers. So these are some of the specific instances, I think, of just speaking classes in general and trying to bring authentic practice tests into IELTS classes that can kind of hinder us. So hopefully today we can look at some ways that we can get around that. And for me, I like to focus on this triangle of authenticity. When I was planning my IELTS speaking lessons, and I knew that I wanted to give them something that was more focused on the test, I looked and I said, well, if I don't have the timing and I don't have the resources really to give each student their own interview, 11 to 14 minutes, and making meaningful, how can I still give some authentic practice testing in that testing mode? You notice the blue triangle in the center here says APT practice. In this practice testing mode, to make sure that my students can still benefit and move away from the book and feel like they're getting actual authentic test practice. And I think that it comes from taking any two of the three slices of this triangle. And so one slice is authentic script or frames, actually using the language that they are going to hear in the test, whether it's the instructions that are going to be given or making sure that the test questions that we ask are authentic and are exactly the type of questions that they would hear on the test. Maybe not the exact same questions, but that they're written in a way that is reflective of what they're going to find when they sit in that room with the examiner. Another thing is authentic timing, that when we ask them to speak for 2 minutes, that we're timing it and making sure that they know what 2 minutes is, or that we're showing them how a set of frames on speaking part 1, which is 4 or 5 questions on one topic, the timing of how that can last 2 or 3 minutes and make their answers appropriate in that way. And thirdly, the third slice, providing authentic models or feedback. And I think that, making sure that after we have had them do some speaking, that they either get something about what they've just done that lets them know how they could improve and what they need to be working on, or the opportunity to see somebody else taking the test and see what feedback they would have got as well. And so for me, with the activities that I developed to try to bring in authentic practice tests in a practice mode, I try to just aim for 2 out of any of these 3 slices. And I think the best way to demonstrate this is to just jump right in with an activity. So let's look at how I might do this to bring together authentic frames. And by frames, again, I mean that set of 4 or 5 questions on a speaking test, usually found in part 1, that's all about one topic. How can I bring together maybe an authentic frame and authentic modeling? So I might start with an activity like this as a warm-up when I'm doing a lesson. And I'd like for you all to play along. So we're going to play a game of Guess the Word. And all the circles around, you can see they're covered up, but all the circles are going to try to focus us in on one specific word. And I'm going to show you one word at a time, and when you think you know what the word that I'm kind of aiming at is, I want you to type it into the chat box, and we'll see who can get it the fastest. So your first clue about the word is family. Are there any words that you think I might be shooting at when I'm talking about family? I'm seeing some good words here. Good words, parents, relatives, relationships, that could be. In-laws, children. Ooh, love it. Get on well. Great. Now I'm going to show you the second word, and remember, I'm looking for a connection now. I'm looking for a word that connects the words family and real. Oh, love, home connected. I like this. I'm going to give a third word now. And again, we're trying to guess one word that has to do with family, real, and pet. Inclusion, I'm seeing some conceptualization here. I see love a lot. That makes me so happy over here in Thailand. This is great. And here's your fourth word, full. Family, real, pet, and full. I'm looking for one word that connects all four of them. Oh, these are great friends, time, caring, such a positive audience. You all are great. I'm going to give you the fifth word now. First. Some questions I see. Is it pet love? Pet baby? Car? What's going on? All right, I'm going to give you one more clue, and we'll see if anybody can guess the word. And again, all six of these are related to one word. The last word is maiden. I see it in the chat box now. Name. Yes, the word is name. Family name, real name, pet name, full name, first name, maiden name. Fantastic. I hope you found that enjoyable and a little bit interactive. The reason why I did that is because I want to talk about names. And now what I have here is a standard sort of exercise that we see in a lot of textbooks, where we can rearrange words to make questions. And so what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to just pick one of them. If you want an easy one, you can pick number 1. If you want a more challenging one, you can pick number 4. But pick whatever you like, and I'd like for you to try to rearrange these sentences so that they make a question. Rearrange the words in the sentences to put them in the correct order, if you don't mind. You're all going for the fourth one. I like that. Would you change your name if you could? Excellent English. Excellent grammar. How did your parents choose your name? Yes. Does your name have any special meaning? Yes. Is your name common or unusual in your country? Yes. Now, I hope you liked those two activities. I hope that, we saw that the first one kind of let us in and we were focusing in on the concept of name, and then this one was rearranging, the sentences to ask questions about name. That comes from an authentic practice test book. This is from IELTS 11. And if you look at part 1 of the speaking, the example, names, that's what this frame is about, names. And the first question, how did your parents choose your name? Does your name have any special meaning? And is your name common or unusual in your country? And if you could change your name, would you? We can use these authentic frames and these authentic test questions that we get with the authentic practice test, especially those that come from Cambridge University Press, Cambridge 8, Cambridge 9, Cambridge 10. We can use all of these to supplement context found in our course books and make activities out of them that bring in a level of authenticity that students can see. And not only that, after we do this sort of resource, we can ask them to match maybe sample questions and answers. So you can see here I have, how did your parents choose your name? And I've got A, B, C, and D. And really quickly, I'd like for you just to read A, B, C, or D, and I'd like for you to try to match which one of those best answers the question, how did your parents choose your name? How did your parents choose your name? Exactly. It's C. But as we read through them, we're getting models of possible answers. We're seeing what a good length could be. It's not about, memorizing each and every exact, phrase that they've used, but it's about seeing what an authentic answer to these questions could be. And then you can see in exercise 3, ask and answer questions 1 to 4 with a partner, and remember to use informal language and give extended answers. In other words, we can take these frames that are given, and instead of just having, our students ask each other in pairs, what is your name? How did you get your name? And having them answer, then what we can do is expand these. And that is a way that we bring in authenticity and modeling, I think, into an IELTS classroom. Now, I have a confession to make. I did not create that activity. I've done similar activities in my classrooms when I was an IELTS teacher, but I did not create that activity. I downloaded that activity, actually, from this website, practicemakesperfect.cambridge.org. And what you can see on this website are a lot of lesson plans that are already made for you for incorporating and integrating practice tests, authentic practice tests, into a lesson. Already pre-made lesson plans. That came from a lesson plan that I think Jenny had put up there on the IELTS. And I should make it clear, it's not only for the IELTS, for other Cambridge exams, first certificate, PET, CET, or KEY, or whatever you call it, where you're at. We've put a lot of lesson plans on there because practice, the idea of practice making perfect doesn't just mean repeatedly testing. A lot of times we can over-test students. What it means is making sure we're bringing in authentic practice in a meaningful way that can help our students see the positive impact that doing those sorts of activities can have towards their goal, towards their final test score. So, and I'm seeing some people say that you're a member of the site and you find it supportive. Thank you. I think it's a great resource, and it's something we put out there for you because it's just so important to make sure that in an exam situation that we have all 3 parts of that equation, I think, to make our students have the best possibility to achieve what they're hoping to. So again, that was authentic scripts or frames mixed with authentic models or feedback. It had nothing to do with authentic timing. Now, when I say bringing it in practice mode, we just need 2 slices. There's different combinations possible on this triangle of authenticity. I think one thing that doesn't happen enough is students seeing authentic models of the test through videos that are available. And this is where I want to make sure that we're very cautious. When I go on Vimeo or YouTube, I see a lot of videos that claim to be students doing an IELTS speaking test. And a lot of them just aren't authentic. They're a teacher, sure, and a student sitting in a room asking questions and answering them back and forth, but it doesn't have that level of authenticity. You know, the IELTS is a very standardized test. There is a script. You know, I can tell you that when they sit down, the first thing that a student is going to hear is, this is the speaking test for the International English Language Testing System conducted on the, and whatever the date is. And I can tell you that when they finish part 1 and move to part 2, the examiner every single time is going to say, now I'm going to give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. You can make some notes if you wish. Do you understand? Here's some paper and a pencil for making notes, and here's your topic. I'd like you to describe. There's a script of authenticity that goes on in IELTS. And I think that having students watch a complete IELTS test is a way that if we have 9 or 10 students in a classroom, that they still get that experience of authenticity, even if they're not being the ones producing the language. This video clip that you see in the bottom left is a still from the official Cambridge Guide to IELTS. And I'm happy to say that the videos that come with that material are authentic. You can hear the actual IELTS scripts. The practice test and complete IELTS course book, if you look in the back, those speaking practice tests use the authentic script. And also, if you do want to find a video on YouTube, make sure you're going through a website you can trust, like Cambridge English. You know, Cambridge English TV itself has a video that is authentic. Don't just believe that when you see the IELTS say this was a real speaking test of and a model of a 7.5, that it is authentic. We want to make sure that we're giving students examples of what they'll actually encounter in the test. And also, when we are watching, we don't just have to watch to get the idea. We can watch and put ourselves in a bit of an examiner's shoes. And this is something that also comes from the Practice Makes Perfect website. And it's something that if we have students working in pairs, we can have students try to give a little bit of peer evaluation, or when we're watching a video, we can have them look and see things with what's going on in the video in the same manner that the IELTS cares about, with the same criteria. For example, the fluency and coherence, the lexical resource, the grammatical range and accuracy, the pronunciation. And I love this feedback sheet because it doesn't dwell too much on just the band score. What it does is it lets us really know what each part is looking for. We can also make a slice with authentic timing and authentic feedback. Now, again, I said be careful of websites, or these sorts of things. But one website that I would direct you to is writefix.com. Now, the actual frames are not authentic on this website, but they have a wonderful speaking section. And if you play around on it, you can see that it can also give some topics, and it can allow us, some more ideas of what we can ask students to get language production so we can give them meaningful feedback. So that's writefix.com, which, like I said, I think is another good resource for you to go around and play with. I won't dwell on it here, but it's definitely something I had in my repertoire. If we do want to try to give feedback based on the IELTS, I think that the band descriptors are a great place to start. But let's not, focus purely on band 9. I think that a good place to look for what the IELTS expects from students is around the band 7 level. And if I zoom in on band 7, you can see things like, speaking at length without noticeable effort or loss of coherence, or range of connectives and discourse markers, or a variety of topics in this other category, or a range of complex structures. What really want to point out here is that, it's not about helping our students get a 9 all the time. These descriptions of how to improve, they can be found throughout the band descriptors. And we shouldn't be using band descriptors, I think, of giving students scores. I think that that's a misuse of band descriptors in the classrooms. I think that it is our job to use the band descriptors so we can help give our students more constructive feedback. There's evaluative feedback, which is like saying, I think you would get a 6.5, or I think you would give a 7. To me, that's not very useful, nor is it motivating as much as, here's what I heard you do well using the language of the band descriptors. I heard your fluency improving. I heard you use a lot of less common vocabulary. I heard you, do these things. And I would encourage you to continue to focus on this so that our feedback can be more constructive than it is evaluative. And I'll just say that that is something that I think is very much important. It's not our job to give the band scores. It's our job to help students focus on what they can do to raise their band scores. Now I want to get into just some specific activities that I liked. And this was an activity when I had a larger group that I liked to use for developing Part 1 skills. So you get students to work in groups of 4. And for those of you who haven't seen a webinar before, I used to have my students buy the same IELTS Authentic Practice Test book, and we used it as kind of a workbook. So all my students in the class would have IELTS 8. All of them would have IELTS 6, in addition to their course book. And we would use that to bring in different parts of this authentic practice testing. Well, there are 4 tests in a book. There are 4 speaking tests. So what I would have them do is I would have each student turn to a different speaking test. So one would have the topic of names, one would have the topic of transport, one would have, the other topics. And they would go around and they would announce their topics. And then there would be a pile of cards on the tables. And I'll show you the cards in just a second. But basically, they just draw a card and they do what the card says. If it says to ask a person a question, they can choose any question in their frame. So, you could ask somebody, if you could change your name, would you? Or who chose your name for you? You could actually do that and let them go in any order, but asking one question at a time, and then after the person is answered, whoever answered will draw the next card. And they're finished when all the cards have been used. So the cards can be printed and laminated, and if you have larger classes and you need to take more time, some of these cards can be repeated. You don't have to use just one card one time. You can make multiple copies and have them in a deck. And I want to show you quickly what a few of the cards that I used said. So for example, one of the cards was ask a question to the person on your right. So you'll turn to the person on your right. They're in groups of 4. If you could change your name, would you? Or ask a question to the person on your left. Ask a question to the person opposite you. Again, they don't know. They will finish speaking, and then they will draw a card, and they'll have to do what the card says to do. And I would make lots of copies of those cards. But I would also put in fewer copies of cards, but some that made the game a little bit more interesting. Cards like this. They draw a card and it would say, keep talking. Explain the reason for your last answer. Or make the person who asked you the question answer it. So, oh, you asked me, now you have to answer the same question. And it provides these little moments of, oh, these surprises in the game. Some other cards that I liked, keep talking for 30 more seconds about your topic. Or ask a question and the other 3 players need to play rock, paper, scissors and ask whoever didn't win. Think of a no question related to your topic and you can ask whoever you want. Or you have to answer again with the opposite idea. So if you said, I wouldn't change my name, then if they drew this card, then they'd have to talk about why they would change their name. And I see you asking if there's a skip card. My student's favorite card was this one, where they can take another card and keep this one as a free pass. And then they can ask someone else to answer if they want. And this is just a way to get that authentic practice, again, with those scripts, and be able to make it in such a way that the students feel engaged and involved, and feel like they're actually working towards the test with different contexts. So that's something I liked to do. For speaking part 2, and I should tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt that. I should tell you that I will make copies of those cards, which I've done, available on my LinkedIn profile. It's on, and I'll give you a link to that later. So, and Frank, I'm seeing a lot of, could we do this? Could we do a skip? You can do whatever you want. Have fun with it. This is just an idea. If you want to do something else, if you want to make your own cards, please do. But I've put a copy of this in an article on my LinkedIn profile, and I'll give you the link to that at the end of this webinar, so you can download those resources as well. For developing part 2, a big thing is having students talk a long time. Fluency is a big part of the IELTS. So here's something that I took from Drama Techniques by Alan Malley and Alan Duff. Having students just practice something that builds on itself. And this isn't really authentic in the sense that it answers a question, but it gives us chances, developing the pronunciation and fluency that's expected. So students will take a deep breath in, and they'll try to finish the whole sentence. So like, Mary arrived. Mary arrived. And then we'll keep on adding to it chunk by chunk, so that we then have our students and we drill with them, Mary arrived late. And again, adding it by chunks, so we get the linked speech and the addition, and trying to build up the fluency, which is oftentimes missing on part 2 of speaking. Mary arrived late from the airport. And trying to get them to say it all in one breath, and it can keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, until we can try to challenge our students in one breath to say something like, my cousin Mary, who had been away in Italy visiting her boyfriend, arrived late last night from the airport in a rainstorm just as we were getting ready for bed. Now, that might be a bit much for some of your lower level students, but if they're going for a band 7 or 7.5, this is good practice. And the key here, thank you, Francis, for the applause. The key here, I think, is adding it by chunks, not word by word, because when we talk about pronunciation and fluency, we're not talking about just adding another word. We're talking about changing visiting her boyfriend to visiting her boyfriend. So even after they've done something, if they've prepared an answer, this is something that we can do to maybe repeat that and help their fluency. Another activity that I like is what's called the 4-3-2, which is popularized by Paul Nation. And this is, if you can remember the name of the activity, you can remember how it's done. The 4-3-2 stands for 4 minutes, 3 minutes, then 2 minutes. And what happens is the learners work in pairs, and we'll say learner A talks to learner B and has a time limit of 4 minutes to maybe do the part 2. And learner B just listens and does not interrupt or question. And when the 4 minutes are up, the teacher says change partners. And learner A moves to a new learner B. It's not that it's learner B's turn. Learner A turns to a new learner B, and the teacher says begin. And learner A gives the exact same talk, using the exact same notes, trying to say the exact same thing, but this time has only 3 minutes. And when the 3 minutes are up, the teacher says stop, change partners, and with a new partner, learner A now has 2 minutes to talk. And then we can switch, and maybe learner B can have a chance. Or maybe we do learner B next week But the idea is that they do it for 4 minutes, then the same thing for 3 minutes, then the same thing for 2 minutes. It does take a lot of time in the classroom, but it gets a huge return on advancement, or on your investment. It involves vocabulary and grammar and discourse, and the number of words per minute that students speak increases, and the hesitations they make decrease. And it really is a way that we can help with part 2. For part 3, I would say make sure we're getting students to think beyond themselves. And the way that I did that was to make sure that my class knew my friend Negative Nancy, and my class hated Negative Nancy. And Negative Nancy is a rational person. She's not stupid. She's very intelligent. She just always thinks the opposite way that you do. She's a true contrarian. So that I might ask my students, do you like to watch movies at home, or do you like to go to the cinema? And they will say, I like to go to the cinema. And I will say, I'm glad that you like to go to the cinema, but my friend Negative Nancy likes to watch movies at home. What do you think are the reasons she likes to watch movies at home? And then they have to put themselves in the opposite situation and think about the other side and give a more balanced approach. And I think that when we put this character of Negative Nancy on it, they understand that it's not just about talking about their opinions, but part 3 is about looking beyond yourself and being able to think about why somebody who might disagree with you on something might do it. So I would just start by asking them a question about themselves, and then turn and say, that's great for you, but Negative Nancy, and Negative Nancy always liked the other thing. I always am big for integrating technology, and I think that it's perfectly fine now to send some speaking home as homework. I mean, saying, I want you to give me a video of you completely talking about whatever topic, and it must be between 1 minute 50 seconds and 2 minutes. If it's 1 minute 47 seconds, it's too short. If it's 2 minutes 5 seconds, it's too long. And it must cover all parts of this prompt, so that you give them repeated practice. And they may have to try, again and again and again to get their video to fit in that time frame. But this is a way of sending speaking homework home, where they might, just like we would expect for them to do with writing, to erase and delete and try again, to do it with speaking. And then we can give feedback based on the videos that they give us. But I think what we need to remember is what we're going for. We're not going for perfection. The main goal is that the language should be of an acceptable level. And I love this quote from Penny and I'm just going to let you read it. Again, every IELTS student has their own definition of success. What the student who needs a 5.5 needs to do with speaking is different than a student who needs a 7. And I think that we shouldn't be encouraging them to try to hit that 9 mark every time. We need to have them understand what their goal is and what is acceptable in them. And that's why I think that our feedback needs to be constructive. And that's what I meant about using those worksheets and the band scores in order to give them whatever feedback they need to make their goal, not to tell them what score that they would get. So those are just some things that I try to do to give slices of authenticity. Again, we can't always bring in real authentic practice testing every time as a test mode. It takes time. But I think bringing in practice mode and trying to make sure that we're using 2 of these 3 slices is the key to success, and bridging that gap between the course book and just over-testing, which sometimes happens in IELTS classroom. Now, there is something to be said about authentic practice test testing, giving students the opportunity to experience a full speaking test. Because it's one thing to answer questions like this, it's another thing to talk for 11 to 14 minutes nonstop. And so I think that we do need to provide opportunities to give all 3 slices of the triangle. Maybe not as much because, again, classroom management. And maybe this is making appointments with our students one-on-one to give them the full test with authentic frames and some feedback and the timing. But one thing that is a huge, huge, huge help that we have now that we didn't have 10 years ago when I started teaching IELTS courses is TestBank. And TestBank is something that we've developed here at Cambridge University Press that gives students a chance to feel what it's like hearing the authentic script with a video of an examiner with the authentic timings and be able to record themselves giving answers to an IELTS speaking test. And so they can actually go through the full test, and it will ask them, what is your name, where do you come from, all the way up into going into the questions on part 3, all in one sitting with that video, and they have a chance to respond. And so TestBank is a way that we can hit all 3 parts of those triangles and still have time in our class to do the teaching. And while the program itself does not give feedback, we can actually, the students can record it and it can actually be given to the teachers, and we can help students analyze their own feedback with it. This is another screenshot you can see. This is exactly what the student would see when they're using TestBank. This is obviously a part 2 with an authentic practice test, and the examiner has said, now I'm going to ask you some questions, and he's going to go through the script, and this way they get the full authenticity, and we have opportunities. Because if you remember my equation, it was a course book, and it was authentic practice testing in practice mode, but there also needs to be authentic practice testing in test mode, and I want to make sure that our classroom management logistics don't hinder us too much from being able to accomplish all of that. So here's a page basically of the main resources which I drew from here. Practicemakesperfect.cambridge.org has, like I said, those lesson plans that involve all parts of that speaking that I did with the names. Writefix.com, it's not authentic, and we need to make it clear to our students that it's not authentic, but if we want to have extra chances for them to practice timing and for us to give feedback on what they're saying, it's again a way to get 2 slices of the pie, or the triangle, as I call it here. This Larry Filazzo at EduBlogs goes into deeper description of the 4-3-2 activity. I know I went kind of quickly through it. It's hard to, as I always say in a webinar, it's hard to, save the world in 1 hour. But this is an excellent explanation of the 4-3-2 technique. So Larry Filazzo, EduBlogs. And again, on my LinkedIn profile, I've put a copy, a PDF copy and a Word document of those speaking cards that I use that you can download and be able to use. You do need to register for LinkedIn, and if you aren't on, I encourage you to be, because I do think we're professionals in this field, and I think LinkedIn is a great way for professionals to network and get together. But if nothing else, you can go on there. It's in the article section, and you can download the speaking cards. So that's basically what I wanted to cover on my part, and I will say to my wonderful presenters and Jessica, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Really interesting session. I'm going to now hand you over to my colleague Jenny, who's going to talk you through some of the official Cambridge IELTS preparation materials. And after that, we'll come back to Alan for a short Q&A session. So don't forget to type any questions you have into the chat box, and we'll look at those in a couple of minutes. So I'm handing over to my colleague Jenny now.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenny. I hope you can hear me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our IELTS preparation materials now. First, a little bit about the practice tests, which Alan has been referring to in this webinar. The authentic practice test production process takes 2 years and is actually the same as for live exams. As Alan mentioned, practicemakesperfect.com is our new website dedicated to helping teachers get the most out of authentic practice tests, with downloadable lesson plans and teaching tips. You can see the URL there on the screen. if you don't find what you want on there right away, we're constantly adding new content throughout the year. And then our official practice tests, again, as Alan's mentioned, they're available in print and online. IELTS 12, our latest set of print practice tests, is coming in June, and it contains 4 authentic practice tests with answers. TestBank offers 4 online practice tests and also gives you the ability to take the tests in either test mode or practice mode, both with auto marking. TestBank I, on the other hand, offers a single online practice test, which is perfect for self-study students, someone who just wants to give it a go before the real exam. We also produce a wide range of supplementary materials that can be used in class or at home, and the official Cambridge Guide to IELTS, I know someone had a question about this earlier in the webinar, covers everything you need to perform with confidence on test day, and itself includes 8 practice tests. And finally, a brand new 4-level course, Mindset for IELTS, is launching in September. Its unique blend of coursebook and online modules helps students develop their English skills, and it also familiarises them with the test. There's plenty of support for teachers new to the IELTS test, so look out for that if you're an IELTS teacher. And now back to Jessica and Alan for the Q&A.
Thanks, Jenny. Really interesting to see that information there. And we've had a question there in the chat box about IELTS 12, and that's coming out in June. So if you visit the CUP website, you'll be able to find more information. Okay, now we're running short of time, so we've got a question and answer session now with Alan. And we've had a couple of questions, so please do remember to type them into the chat box, and I'll try and get as many of those questions to Alan as possible. So Alan, we've had a question about the accents in the speaking test, and someone has asked how do the students cope with the examiner's non-English accents?
Well, examiners, to be an IELTS examiner, will have had to have demonstrated that they have, an intelligible level of English. I used to be an IELTS examiner, and I'm not British, and I think that surprises a lot of people, being American. And there's nothing that says in this day of, globalization and everything that the IELTS is a British test for British, universities. It truly is the international English language testing system. So what I think is important is that we expose students, in our normal courses to a variety of accents, making sure that they are what I like to call successful users of English. If you listen to the IELTS listening practice test, the authentic practice material, there's going to be a range of accents as well. It's not always going to be, Johnny Cambridge talking to Mary Oxford. So I mean, making sure that they are used to hearing English that doesn't sound like, tape script 3.5, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, that they have that confidence in knowing that English sounds like different things. But for an IELTS examiner to be an IELTS examiner, they must be intelligible. So that's how I would say it, just exposure, and knowing that is a possibility, that they're not going to get a British citizen when they get into that speaking
Thanks, Alan. That's
interview.
A really, good point to know that IELTS really is an international test of English, so there's all kinds of English accents there. A couple of questions that have come through about IELTS compared to TOEFL, and the fact that TOEFL has the kind of online platform, it's the computer-based elements of the test, but IELTS is paper-based. So you'll always have the face-to-face, real-life speaking test. That's right, isn't it, Alan?
Yes, and even, you may be hearing about computer-based IELTS that's happening. I mean, in Thailand, we offer computer-based IELTS to students as well, but the speaking test is still face-to-face in that situation. And, just that I don't know of any plans for the future, but I don't see that changing anytime soon, because I think that that's a valuable thing that, the Cambridge exams having not just IELTS, all the Cambridge exams really having that human interaction in the speaking tests.
And going back again to the accents, we've had a question from, I think it's Arifa. Are students penalised if they have a strong accent?
Again, we're not looking for you to sound British or American. We're if you're, let's just say, if you are, Vietnamese, we're looking for you to sound like a Vietnamese person who can speak English well. You're not penalized for having an accent. The question really comes from, how much does that accent impede somebody from understanding what you're saying? When we look specifically at something like a band 8 or so of speaking, and I don't have the band descriptor in front of me, but I think it even says something like, is easy to understand throughout, and the accent has minimal effect on intelligibility. So it's not about having an accent or not, it's about intelligibility. And I hate to pick on my colleagues from Cambridge up there, but I have a friend from Newcastle, and I have to tell you that there are many Malaysians that I know that have strong Malaysian accents, and I can understand them a lot better than I can understand my good friend from Newcastle. So sometimes I would say that I'm not sure that my good friend Joanne would make a perfect 9 on the IELTS speaking pronunciation herself. It's not about being a native speaker, it's about intelligibility. No offense to anybody from Newcastle. You're lovely people.
From Jane here, this is an interesting one. You've shared some really useful ideas, creative ideas for use in the classroom. Jane says that her students are reluctant to be evaluated by their peers because they say, well, they're not teachers. So do you have any ideas for how to deal with that?
I think that one thing is that checklist form of it not being an evaluation. See, here's what I think, and when students hear evaluation or peer evaluation, they think testing and full-on evaluation. I think that a way that we can manage it is to maybe just focus on one part. So instead of saying your peers are going to evaluate you and tell you how you've done, it could just be, while you're talking, I want you to listen to your partner, and I want you to focus on their fluency, and making it about a focus instead of saying, I want you to give them a score. So that's one step. I personally agree with those students, though. Any true constructive or evaluative feedback that's done holistically really needs to come, or at least be validated by the teacher. So I think that when we're doing these things, it can be that the feedback needs to be in a positive form, like, here's what I think you did well, and make sure that your students are telling them, here's where I think you did well, and here's the part, that I think that you were the best at. Maybe I heard you used some words and I didn't know what this meant. That's probably good. And you make it more communicative and helpful in that peer evaluation, more than it is with a list of saying, I think you'll get a 6, you did this, you didn't do that. That's why I like, again, that checklist that says, does your, did the student do this, did you do that? And you notice there's only 3 different things on it. It keeps it more manageable, but it also keeps it more open. When we get to the specific details of how to be better, or direct examples of, you're using the past tense, or I'm not hearing your ED endings well enough, I do think that feedback is best given from the teacher.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Alan. That was a really, really informative session. Don't forget to check our events page for details of our upcoming webinars, which you can visit at cambridge.org/ELT events. And the recording of today's webinar should be live on our blog and YouTube channel next week. And don't forget to download your certificate from the link on screen. So thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.